Hi guys, it's Just Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a recommendation video. If you like this book, then try this book, Romance Edition. Alright guys, so I've been wanting to do this video for a while. I have a pretty good mix of contemporary romance and fantasy romance, and I'm going to be pairing popular books with books that have like a similar vibe, whether they have similar plots, similar tropes, similar characters, or just the feel of the book overall. So I will leave timestamps down below if you're looking for a specific pairing, and if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's get into the recommendations. Alright guys, so I think I'm going to alternate between fantasy romance and contemporary romance. So starting off with fantasy romance, we have the Zodiac Academy by Carolyn Peckman and Susanne Valenti. I'm obsessed with this series. It is following two twin girls, and on their 18th birthday, they find out that they are actually Fae royals. However, in order to gain their inheritance, they have to go to the Zodiac Academy. Unfortunately, when they get there, everyone hates them, and that is because there are already 4 celestial heirs that are ruling the school and want to make the Vega's life a living hell. Now, I love this series. I'm currently on book 6. I'm about to start book 7, and I am so scared because all of you keep telling me I'm going to be emotionally damaged after I finish it, but this series is just so good. I've recommended it many times. Now, if you are a fan of this series, I suggest you pick up The Bonds That Tie by J. Bree. So this is a reverse harem, paranormal, bully romance, and it's so good. I'm so obsessed. So this is following Oleander. And in the very beginning of the story, Oleander is driving in a car with her mom and her mom's 3 bonded. So in this series, bonded are kind of like bonded mates, and it's like a whole family unit. Unfortunately, in the very beginning of the story, Oleander's family is killed, and instead of going back to Oleander's bonded, she ends up fleeing. So she's actually on the run for 4 or 5 years until her bondeds drag her back. And they are not happy she left, so very much a bully romance similar to Zodiac Academy. Now, this is reverse harem. Zodiac Academy is not reverse harem. However, Zodiac Academy is following the 4 celestial heirs. You get to find out a lot about them. You get in their heads. There's some of the chapters are in their POV. Similar to this, she has 4 bonded, and I love all of them so much. So, highly recommend. It also is taking place in a school similar to Zodiac Academy, and it's so good. So, if you like Zodiac Academy, definitely pick up The Bonds That Tie by J. Bree. Alright, so next up we have a very emotional contemporary romance pairing. So first up we have 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tille. So this is following Rune and Poppy. So when Rune is 4 years old, his parents decide they're going to move from Norway to Georgia. And he's very unhappy about this until Rune meets Poppy. She is this adorable little southern girl, and she's just so optimistic and happy to be alive. And they hit it off right away. So they're best friends. And once they get into high school, it blossoms into more, and they start to be in a relationship. And they really depend on each other and just love each other and do everything together. So unfortunately, Rune finds out that he has to move back to Norway. His father got a job there, and they are both devastated. But Poppy swears she's going to keep in touch with Rune until he comes back. They think he's going to come back in 2 or 3 years. So for the first year, they're keeping in contact. They're very sad, but still they're writing letters every day and talking. And then suddenly, Poppy just cuts off communication. She completely stops talking to Rune, and Rune is so hurt by this. So when he eventually comes back to Georgia, he is completely different. He's super emo, he's mad at everybody, and he just doesn't understand what happened. So it's really, most of this book is once they reunite, and we find out why Poppy cut Rune off, and it's super sad, super emotional. I loved 99% of this book. Had this book ended without its epilogue, it probably would have been a 5-star read for me. However, I hate this epilogue with a burning passion. But if you enjoyed this book, I highly recommend you pick up Full Tilt by Emma Scott. This is the first book in the Full Tilt Duet. It might have a different name, but both books are amazing. So this is following Jonah and Casey. Casey is in this rock band, and she's really going nowhere with her life. She is just drinking and partying nonstop. So one day she gets blackout drunk, and she wakes up in her limo driver's apartment. So Jonah is this artist, and he makes these amazing glass sculptures, and that's really his main drive in life. And it's really the story of them healing each other And this book was so good. I was bawling my eyes out at the end of this. I just absolutely loved it. So highly recommend. If you are a fan of A Thousand Boy Kisses, you will absolutely love the Full Tilt Duet. All right, so next up we have Gild by Raven Kennedy. So this is the first book in the Plated Prisoner series. This is essentially a King Midas retelling. We are following Midas, and he gained his power in this world by being able to turn things into gold. So he actually has a favorite who is Auren, our main character, and she is solid gold. The king keeps her in this cage, and she is just broken. So I actually almost DNF'd this book multiple times. It took me so long to get through, just because Auren is such an not unlikable character, but she really just feels defeated. She is spending her days drinking wine and just pining after Midas, and it's hard to read about. And then as the story progresses, or really into the end of this book, she is freed and she kind of becomes her own person, and I really enjoyed it. So if you like that aspect of Gild, I recommend checking out Eight Kings So Cold by Elle. This has a very different story. We are following this girl, and in the very beginning of the story, we find out that she has cast her husband out and taken away all of his memories of her. And there's also this army that is about to invade her lands. So then when she's like doing her daily duties, this guy or one of her servants comes and tells her that her ex-husband, who has forgotten about her, is about to marry someone else. And she becomes enraged and she drags her husband back and kind of starts torturing him. And we get to find out all of the events that led to all of that happening. And also, our main character, Audra, is also a very broken and very flawed character. However, she's also like merciless, and we get to find out how she became so cold and detached, and I love her as a character. I just think the author did such an amazing job of just making you root for this character, but also understand like why she is doing these terrible things. Like you 100% understand her motivations. And I love this series. The second book, The Stray Prince, is a little bit more towards the whole fantasy aspect. This is a little bit more political, but there's also like a love triangle and it's really fun. And the second book is a little bit darker, and I can't really say too much because it's going to give away spoilers, but they are both really, really good. This is probably one of my favorite duets I have read in 2022. All right, next up is a taboo contemporary romance pairing. Both of these books have the same trope, and I just absolutely adore both of these books. So first up we have Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. This is following Jordan, and she has been dating the same guy for a very long time, but he just doesn't treat her very well. She is really more of like the mother figure. So it's her birthday, she gets off work, and her boyfriend just forgets to pick her up. So she decides to go to the movies. And when she gets to the movies, she meets this very attractive older guy named Pike. They hit it off, they're having a great time. However, when the movie is over, we find out that Pike is actually her boyfriend's father. And not only that, she finds out that they are actually going to go live with him. So now this is super awkward because obviously Pike and Jordan have this connection, but also Pike's the father of her boyfriend. And I just love this story. I love Pike and Jordan's relationship. He's just so good to her, and I love it. This is one of my absolute favorite Penelope Douglas books. So if you enjoyed this book, I highly recommend picking up Praise by Sarah Kate, which also features the boyfriend's dad trope. So in Praise, it is following Emerson. This is the first book in the Salacious Players Club, and Emerson and his friends decide to start this business where they have a club that is only for people that have certain kinks. So where they can go and not be ashamed of what they're doing sexually. And it's just great. Highly recommend. If you have not read this series, definitely pick it up. Super spicy, super good. Love the characters. Now, this particular book is following Emerson, and it's also following Charlie. So Charlie is this young girl. She breaks up with her boyfriend, and she's trying to get money from him. And he says, go to my father's office, and he'll pay you. So Charlie goes to Emerson's office, and Emerson mistakes Charlie for his new submissive. And luckily, Charlie's really into it. So they start up a relationship without telling her ex-boyfriend, and the angst and the drama and the spice, and it's just really good. So if you like age gap and you also want ex-boyfriend or boyfriend's dad trope, highly recommend. I do think Birthday Girl is a little bit more of a emotional story. This is a little bit spicier, but both are amazing reads. All right, next up we have another very popular fantasy romance series From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is following Poppy, and Poppy is the maiden. She has been raised in isolation, preparing for her ascension. We don't know what that means. She doesn't know what it means. It's some sort of ceremony that's going to happen, I think, on her 18th birthday. So now, like I said, she's been raised in complete isolation. She hasn't been able to talk to anyone unless it's been deemed appropriate by the people kind of keeping her prisoner. So one day she decides she wants to go out, live a little bit, and she sneaks out to this tavern in disguise. And she meets Hawk, who is the newest member of the Rise Guard, and he kind of protects her and takes her under his wing, and then he gets assigned to be her personal guard, and it goes from there. I love this series so much. I have multiple videos. I'll leave linked in the cards and in the description, but this series is just one of my absolute favorites. We have vampires, we have werewolves, we have politics, and we have a lot of spice, and it's just so much fun. So if you are a fan of this book, I highly recommend picking up What Lies Beyond the Veil by Harper L. Woods. So at first I didn't think these books had a lot of similarities, but the more I thought about it, they really do. So this is following a girl who's living in this very patriarchal society. She doesn't have a lot of rights. She's living very similar to how Poppy was kind of living. And in this community, people are sacrificed in order to keep this veil running. And this veil separates her community from the Fae world. Now, unfortunately, our main character is picked to be in the ceremony and is picked to be sacrificed. However, right when she's about to be sacrificed, the veil ruptures and she has to go out on the run. She meets up with this guy who kind of helps her out, also kind of protects her, and he might be hiding something. And I just love the story. The second book in the series is about to come out. I actually think this got picked up by a traditional publisher, so they might be doing a little bit of editing and rewrites, but I do know the second book is going to be coming out for a limited time when it was originally supposed to be released at the end of August. But yeah, if you like From Blood and Ash, I think you will definitely enjoy What Lies Beyond the Veil. All right, so next up I actually have two books by the same author that remind me of another book. So we have The Thorns Remain, and this is by Jennifer Hartmann. This is definitely my favorite book by her. This is following a guy who is recently been divorced. His wife ended up having an affair with a married man, and he is just devastated, and he wants revenge, and he doesn't care who he hurts along the way. That is his driving motivation in life right now, is to get revenge on the people that hurt him. And this book, I didn't know how I was feeling when I was reading it. I had so many different emotions. I think it says a lot about divorce, and it was just a very interesting experience to be in the head of somebody who just wants to hurt people and wants revenge, and I really ended up enjoying it. So this is the first book. The second book is actually my least favorite book by Jennifer Hartmann. It is The Wrong Heart, and it is following this woman that on her anniversary, her husband ends up dying, and his heart is given to, or his heart is donated. So our main character ends up having a texting relationship with the person that received his heart, and they have this connection. We're also following Parker, who is just the grumpiest of guys. He just really hates life. He did have a very rough childhood, but he is just unhappy. This is very much a grumpy sunshine type book, and they end up meeting at some sort of therapy session. I forget exactly what it was, but they end up forming a relationship, and it kind of goes from there. I actually didn't mind this. The very end of this kind of felt a little bit ridiculous. I really didn't like the whole bridge scene, if you've read this already. But overall, it just wasn't really for me, but I understand that a lot of people very much do enjoy this book. Now, Devious Lies by Parker S. Huntington, I feel like has elements of both the books I just mentioned. So Devious Lies is an age gap bully romance. We are following this girl that has a huge crush on we're following a very wealthy girl, and she has a huge crush on her maid's son, and she's just been obsessed with him most of her life, and he really doesn't reciprocate the feelings. So one day when they are in high school, she's like, I'm gonna sleep with him. I know he just broke up with his girlfriend. So she sneaks into his bedroom, they have sex, and then when the lights come on, she finds out that she didn't actually sleep with her best friend. She slept with her best friend's older brother. So after that, we kind of time jump, and now our main character is living in poverty. She has absolutely no money. She has no connections to her family, and she's trying to get a job. So she ends up getting a job at the older brother's hotel without him realizing it, because for some reason, the older brother hates her family with a passion. And we find out the older brother really just wants revenge on her family. So when the older brother, Nash, finds out that our main character is working in his hotel, he decides he's going to make his life a living hell. We also find out that the older brother is having a texting friendship with a girl that was also wronged by this main character's family. So that's where I kind of got The Wrong Heart. It does have a little bit of that, like, fake communication, if you kind of understand. I can't really say very much without giving away spoilers, but there is a connection to the wrong heart, but then it also very much feels like all the thorns remain because our main character just wants revenge, and he is doing some horrible things to seek revenge instead of just like living his best life. So if you liked both those Jennifer Hartmann books, I highly suggest picking up Devious Lies by Parker S. Huntington. Next up, I feel like this fantasy romance pairing has already been said by many people, so I will keep this very brief. We have A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. My favorite series. I love this series so much. It is following Farah. She is this human girl that lives on the border of the Fey lands. She's living in poverty. One day she goes out to hunt a wolf and she accidentally kills a fairy. So she is taken to the Spring Court and she ends up having a relationship with the fairy of the Spring Court. And it goes from there. It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling. This is probably my least favorite book in the series. Second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, is divine. So if you enjoyed this book, you will 100% enjoy These Hollow Vows by Lexi Rye. And so the second book in this duet was just released. I actually really loved it. I know some people either loved it or hated it. But this is following Bree, and she lives in a world where you can actually make deals with fairies. But if you do this, a lot of times bad things will happen to you. So she tries to avoid fairies at all cost until the king of the Unseelie court steals her sister and brings her to the Fey realm. So Bree ends up going to the Fey world in order to find her sister. And when she gets there, she meets the prince of the Seelie court. And then she meets a band of misfits from the Unseelie court. And then she starts to train and she has to hunt down these objects. And then at the end, she has to go through these trials. And it's super similar to ACOTAR. The misfits that she meets in this book very much reminded me of the Inner Circle from A Court of Thorns and Roses. And there's just so many similarities. I actually made a video when this book first came out comparing ACOTAR and These Hollow Vows. I will leave that in the cards and the description. But yes, this is a very fun duet and I highly recommend. All right, so I'm going to be honest, this next contemporary romance pairing is a little bit of a stretch. I wanted to have an equal amount of fantasy romance and contemporary romance. So both of these books rely heavily on the right person, wrong time trope. That's really all their similarities, but we're going to go with it. So the first one is A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Steiner. So this is following a girl that has a huge crush on her best friend's boyfriend, and they also form instant connection. They really tell each other everything, and they just have this bond, but it doesn't work out because he is dating her best friend. So they end up breaking up, and then something else happens that they can't be together, but they still stay in contact, and really the entire book is just these two people absolutely loving each other and knowing they should be together, but things just not working out. So I liked this book. I was just so unbelievably frustrated by this book because I just wanted these two people to be happy. So if you enjoy that trope, I recommend picking up No Tomorrow by Carrie and Cole. I will say I feel like this one is actually a little bit more emotional. This one is dealing a little bit more with like mental health. It is a rock star romance, but it is also the right person, wrong time. So in the beginning of the story, Piper is this girl. She ends up going out on her lunch break to this park to eat, and she sees Blue, and he is a guitarist, and instantly she's just drawn to him. And then she finds out that he's actually homeless, but that doesn't stop her from pursuing a relationship with him. And then it kind of goes from there, and it is their story spanning 14 years, I believe, similar to A Love Letter to Whiskey, which I think is also spanning about 10 years. And I love this book. This is one of my favorite reads of 2022. It is quite chunky, but it is so good. I was a little frustrated with the main character, but definitely recommend picking up No Tomorrow if you haven't yet by Carrie and Cole. It's just really, really good. All right, so the next two books on this list, I will admit, are vastly different. One is a contemporary dark romance. The other one is a paranormal romance. However, I feel like the relationship at the core of both of these books are very similar. They are both reverse harem. And to quote Caitlin, the love librarian, they both share the love. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So the first book is Locked Up Liars, and this is the first book in the St. View Prison series. So this is following a girl that one night when she's out at a bar with her sister, she sees her sister's ex-boyfriend, who she has always had a crush on. So her sister ends up leaving, and she ends up bringing the ex-boyfriend back to her house. And they end up drinking a bottle of tequila, and when she wakes up, she finds the ex-boyfriend in her sister's bed, and her sister is deceased. So she freaks out, calls the cops, but after thinking about it for a little while, she realizes that she doesn't think the ex-boyfriend really had it in him and would do this. So she tries to hire a lawyer, and it kind of goes from there. So this is a reverse harem between a civilian, an inmate, a prison guard, and a lawyer, and I loved it. But it's not just female-male, it's also MM relationship, And I really love the MM relationship in the overall relationship. Like, I love how they absolutely love each other, but also the two guys have this like deep connection as well, but they both love the female main character, and it's so good. And I really, really enjoyed it. So if you enjoy the St. View prison series, I highly recommend picking up Regally Bitten, and this is the third book in the Blood series. So the Blood series revolves around if the world was taken over by vampires and werewolves, and humans were really just seen as like a food source or used for breeding and like those purposes. So like I said, this is the third book, and this is following a human that has been turned into a lichen or a werewolf. And it's also following two alpha wolves. So the first wolf is the owner of this like clan, and he is the one who actually changed the human into a werewolf. And then the other wolf is his intended bride, and she's the alpha of another clan, and they hate each other. Like, as soon as they meet, they do not like each other, but slowly all three of them form a relationship. And once again, there is a very solid MM relationship inside the overall relationship. And they all just, once again, really love each other. And I love how like they communicated, how they discussed jealousy, and it was just really good. So I think if you enjoyed the St. View prison series, I highly recommend picking up Regally Bitten. All right, and this last pairing is a super dark contemporary romance. I will say I am pairing this solely on vibes. I just felt the entire time I was reading this book, it reminded me of this book. I don't have any like specific ways they are similar, but they just had a very, very similar feel. I guess there are like some specific ways. So if you enjoyed Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton, I have a book for you. So this book, if you don't know, is following this girl that moves into her grandmother's like Gothic style house, and she soon becomes stalked by this like crazy vigilante, and super dark, but then she ends up falling in love with her stalker, and her stalker has very protective instincts for her, even though he kind of like likes to mess with her, especially in this book. So if you enjoyed this book, I recommend picking up The Dancer and the Maas, which is a very dark reverse harem, and it's following this girl that is able to look into the future, and she keeps seeing these guys that have masks, and they're pretty much going to be the rest of her life. So she kind of knows this is going to happen, and then one day she is kidnapped by a bunch of guys wearing masks, and they take her to their isolated Gothic like castle where they keep other numbers, and numbers are women that are very proficient in a certain art. And she becomes the main girl in their reverse harem. But also, they're very cruel to her, but they also really want to protect her. It's just a very interesting dynamic, and the entire time I was reading The Dancer and the Maas, I kept thinking of Haunting Adeline. So like I said, very similar in terms of like Gothic vibes, very different story, especially when you get into the second books in them, but highly recommend, especially if you want like a super dark Gothic romance. Alright guys, thank you for watching my If You Like This, Try This book recommendation video. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have any other books that remind you of other books. And I said this already, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye!